truly understand how the sacred lineage of global football was almost entirely wiped from the face of the earth, we must step into the long, dark, and suffocating silence of a world torn apart by global catastrophe. For 12 agonizing years, between 1938 and 1950, the beautiful game did not exist on the international stage. The grand stadiums of Europe were transformed into military camps. The heavy leather balls were replaced by the machinery of war, and an entire generation of legendary athletes vanished into the trenches of history. When humanity finally emerged from the ashes of conflict, the sport was no longer just a simple game of athletic skill. It had become a desperate, deeply emotional search for lost peace, a collective human longing to rebuild shattered identities through the simple, unifying magic of a rolling ball on a green field. By the summer of 1950, the tournament found its resurrection in the sun-drenched, tropical landscapes of Brazil, a nation that had built the ultimate temple of football, the monumental, terrifyingly immense Maracana Stadium in Rio de Janeiro, designed specifically to host the coronation of a new, unbeatable empire. What it was truly like to breathe inside that specific, high-stakes atmosphere of 1950 was to experience a profound contrast between the absolute trauma of a lost decade and the explosive, colorful euphoria of a South American dream. The Brazilian nation had poured their entire collective soul, their economy, and their absolute pride into building the largest concrete coliseum the world had ever seen, a stadium capable of holding over 200,000 fanatical, shouting spectators. The Brazilian team of 1950 was not just a squad of talented players. They were an artistic hurricane, playing a beautiful, lightning-fast, and devastatingly offensive style of football that left every opponent completely paralyzed with fear. As they marched effortlessly through the final group stage, crushing Sweden 7-1 and dismantling Spain 6-1, the entire country of Brazil dissolved into a premature, white-hot carnival of celebration, convinced that the final match against their small, unassuming neighbors, Uruguay, was nothing more than a formal execution before the golden crown was placed upon their heads. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern mind sink completely into the warm, humid, and intensely electric evening air of Rio de Janeiro on that historic July 16th, 1950. Feel the immense, crushing, and almost spiritual weight of anticipation resting upon the shoulders of 11 Brazilian players as they step out of the dressing rooms into a deafening, chaotic ocean of 200,000 screaming fans. A wall of human sound so massive that it shook the very foundations of the concrete stadium. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active thoughts to slow down completely, matching the steady, unflinching, and unhurried footsteps of the Uruguayan underdogs as they walk into the absolute center of the boiling cauldron. The endless worries of your modern life, the frantic pace of the outside world, and the stresses of your daily routine cannot pierce the comforting, deeply immersive silence that we are building around this historical narrative. You are perfectly safe, you are entirely relaxed, and the slow, majestic rhythm of history is guiding you toward a profound state of deep inner rest. The narrative of that fateful afternoon inside the Maracana remains the single most shocking psychological tragedy in the entire history of modern sports, a moment known forever in the whispers of football mythology as the Maracanazo. Brazil only needed a simple draw to win the championship, and when Friaça scored early in the second half to put the hosts ahead 1-1, the stadium exploded into an absolute frenzy of fireworks and victory songs, with newspapers already printed declaring Brazil the champions of the world. But they had underestimated the cold, calculated, and terrifyingly fierce resolve of the Uruguayan captain, Obdulio Varela, a man forged in the brutal grit of South American street football. Varela calmly picked up the ball from the back of the net, walked slowly to the referee, and spent several long minutes arguing a meaningless offside point, purposely delaying the game, forcing the massive Brazilian crowd to quiet down, and single-handedly draining the frantic emotional momentum out of the stadium. With the absolute composure of an ancient warrior, Varela turned to his teammates and uttered a sentence that would echo through eternity. "Boys, outsiders don't play. The match is won with Cojones on the pitch." What followed was a tactical and psychological masterclass that completely broke the spirit of the Brazilian giant. Uruguay adjusted their defensive lines with absolute mechanical precision, stifling the artistic movements of the Brazilian attack. In the 66th minute, Juan Alberto Schiaffino silenced the crowd with a brilliant, lightning-fast equalizer, but the true, ultimate death blow came in the 79th minute when Alcides Gigia burst down the right flank, feinted across, and precisely slipped a low, powerful shot into the near corner of the net past the diving, desperate hands of Brazilian goalkeeper Moacir Barbosa. The immense Maracana Stadium, filled with 200,000 living souls, instantly froze into an absolute, deathly, and suffocating silence. A silence so sudden and profound that Gigia later famously remarked, "Only 3 people have ever silenced the Maracana with a single movement: Frank Sinatra, Pope John Paul II, and me." When the final whistle blew, the entire nation of Brazil collapsed into a collective state of mourning, a deep human tragedy that fundamentally altered the country's cultural identity and forced them to abandon their historic white jerseys forever, birthing the iconic yellow and green uniform out of the ashes of absolute heartbreak. Yet, as the sacred athletic torch of international football traveled across the vast oceans back to the cold, pristine, and majestic mountain landscapes of Europe for the 1954 tournament in Switzerland, the world was about to witness an entirely different kind of miracle. One forged not in tactical rebellion, but in the ultimate clash between a seemingly divine, invincible machine and the iron. Scientific resurrection of a destroyed nation. The 1954 tournament belonged entirely to the legendary Magical Magyars of Hungary, a team led by the incomparable Ferenc Puskás, Nandor Hidegkuti, and Sandor Kocsis, a squad that had revolutionized the very geometry of football through their innovative, fluid Mighty Magyars tactical system. Hungary had gone entirely undefeated for 4 long years, destroying England 6-3 at Wembley, and arriving in Switzerland as an unstoppable, hyper-advanced footballing alien force that crushed West Germany 8-3 in the early group stages of the tournament. Every single expert, historian, and spectator on Earth knew with absolute certainty that the final match in Bern would be nothing more than a glorious, historic exhibition of Hungarian perfection. But the final match on July 4th, 1954, inside the Wankdorf Stadium in Bern, would completely redefine the limits of human endurance and team chemistry through an event forever immortalized as the Miracle of Bern. On that cold, gray Sunday afternoon, a heavy, relentless summer rainstorm completely saturated the green grass pitch, turning the field into a deep, muddy swamp. A meteorological twist that perfectly favored the West German team, led by their brilliant, stoic manager Sepp Herberger and their legendary captain Fritz Walter, who famously played his absolute best football under heavy rain. Crucially, the Germans possessed a secret, high-tech weapon developed by an innovative craftsman named Adi Dassler, the founder of Adidas, who had provided the German team with revolutionary, exchangeable screw-in cleats that allowed them to maintain perfect grip and balance on the treacherous, slippery mud, while the elegant Hungarian magicians began to slip, slide, and lose their fluid tactical mobility. Within the first 8 minutes of the grand final, the Hungarian machine seemed to fulfill its destiny, with Puskás and Gbor scoring 2 rapid-fire goals to put Hungary ahead 2-0, a crushing blow that would have destroyed the psychological resolve of any ordinary team. But the West Germans, representing a nation completely shattered by the trauma of World War II, possessed a quiet, desperate, and deeply profound hunger for national redemption that could not be broken by adversity. Moving with a disciplined, unyielding, and iron-willed mechanical efficiency, they clawed their way back into the match within a matter of minutes, with Max Morlock and Helmut Rahn scoring 2 miraculous goals to tie the match 2-2 before the halftime whistle blew, turning the game into an absolute, grueling war of attrition under the pouring rain. As the second half ticked away, the exhausted Hungarian players launched a devastating, continuous assault on the German goal, hitting the post, the crossbar, and forcing the legendary German goalkeeper Toni Turek to make a series of impossible, superhuman saves that defied the very laws of physics. Then, in the dying, cinematic minutes of the match, the ultimate moment of destiny arrived. A loose ball bounced off a Hungarian defender directly into the path of Helmut Rahn, who feinted to his left, shifted the ball to his brilliant left boot, and unleashed a low, thunderous shot that flew past the outstretched arms of Gyula Grosics into the far corner of the net. The radio commentator Herbert Zimmermann dissolved into absolute, weeping hysterics on live air, shouting, "Tor! Tor! Tor! Germany are the world champions." A victory that was not just a sporting achievement, but a profound psychological turning point that effectively birthed the modern, confident, and economically resurrected post-war Germany out of the mud of Bern. Let that same deep sense of historical finality, absolute peace, and the gentle, comforting realization that even the most impossible odds can be overcome through quiet, unyielding patience settle softly into your own mind right now, as you listen to the fading, distant echoes of the Maracana and the pouring rains of Bern. The ancient, dramatic roars of 1950 and 1954 have entirely drifted away into the cool, silent mists of the past. The muddy pitches have dried, the heavy leather balls have found peace, and those historical warriors are now resting under a heavy, beautiful blanket of eternal nighttime quiet. You do not need to fight any grand historical battles tonight. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of a nation's expectations, and you do not need to prove your worth to a loud, fast-moving modern world before the morning sun rises. Your long, exhausting day is entirely finished. Your room is completely safe. Your mind is secure, and the peaceful, silent night is welcoming you to let go of everything. Let your active thoughts drift away easily from the dramatic miracles, the heavy sacrifices, and the eternal empires of history, sinking down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed waters of a long, restoring sleep under the quiet, protective watch of the universe. To fully comprehend the deep, complex, and unvarnished truth behind how the world's ultimate football empires were carved out of raw human sacrifice, political warfare, and divine athletic destiny, we must completely strip away the modern, neon-lit commercialism of today's game and travel back to the very dawn of international competition. Long before multi-billion-dollar television contracts, hyper-optimized sports science, or digital globalization transformed the sport into a polished corporate spectacle, the World Football Tournament was born as a gritty, chaotic, and intensely romantic experiment inside the heavy, rain-slicked atmosphere of the early 20th century. By the chilly winter weeks of July 1930, the historic city of Montevideo, Uruguay, found itself standing as the center of the sporting universe. A beautiful, coastal metropolis hosting the first ever international tournament. Yet, behind the romantic veil of this new global experiment lay a brutal, unspoken reality of deep cultural isolation, grueling 2-week ocean voyages across the dangerous Atlantic, and an intense, fiercely protective South American pride that threatened to turn a simple game into an all-out battle for national honor and identity. What it was truly like to exist inside that specific, high-stakes hour of early modern human history was to witness the raw, unpolished, and terrifyingly passionate birth of a global obsession. A time when players did not step onto pristine, mathematically perfect grass, but onto uneven, muddy battlefields, wearing heavy, sweat-soaked cotton jerseys and kicking a laced brown leather ball that became waterlogged, heavy, and dangerously unpredictable in the rain. 7 European nations had outright refused to even cross the Atlantic Ocean due to the immense economic ruin of the Great Depression and the sheer physical exhaustion of sea travel, leaving only 4 brave European teams, France, Belgium, Yugoslavia, and Romania, to board the legendary steamship SS Conte Verde. For over 14 long days, these pioneering athletes trained on the shaking, unstable wooden decks of the ship, running laps around lifeboats and dropping their weights into the deep blue ocean waters, watching the vast horizon with a mixture of terror and burning ambition, knowing that they were sailing toward a completely unknown, fiercely hostile world where football was not just an artistic pastime, but a matter of absolute life and death. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern lungs fill completely with the imaginary, crisp, and beautifully nostalgic winter air of Montevideo during that legendary, historic July evening in 1930. Feel the immense, grounding, and heavy historical weight of an era standing precisely at the crossroads of the old world and the modern industrial machine. A time when a true sporting myth was carved out of raw, unvarnished human survival, captured on early black and white celluloid film, yet remaining deeply, permanently rooted in the ancient human desire for community, struggle, and immortality. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active, tired thoughts to slow down their frantic modern pace completely, perfectly matching the unhurried, majestic, and heavy footsteps of those vintage players as they step out of the cold concrete tunnels into the blinding daylight of the newly built Estadio Centenario. The frantic worries, the constant digital notifications, and the relentless speed of your daily modern routine cannot pierce the heavy, comforting, and beautifully intense atmosphere that is settling over this historic pitch. You are perfectly safe, you are entirely relaxed, and the steady, unhurried rhythm of historical storytelling is guiding you toward a profound sense of inner calm, safety, and rest. When the tournament finally reached its inevitable, volcanic climax on July 30th, 1930, the grand final match between the fierce, bitter neighbors Uruguay and Argentina quickly devolved into a psychological and physical war that started long before the referee could even blow his whistle. The animosity between the two nations was so intensely volatile that a bizarre, unprecedented diplomatic crisis arose over the very ball that would be used for the match, with Argentina insisting on using their own custom-made leather ball, while the host nation Uruguay demanded their own local, heavier sphere. In a historic compromise that perfectly illustrated the raw, untamed nature of early football, the referee decided that Argentina would provide the ball for the first half, and Uruguay would provide their own ball for the second half. This simple logistical dispute altered the entire physical dynamic of the match. Argentina dominated the first half with their lighter, familiar ball, walking into the halftime locker rooms with a commanding 2-1 lead, while thousands of armed soldiers stood guard around the perimeter of the pitch to prevent a full-scale riot from breaking out among the 90,000 fanatical spectators. But the second half belonged entirely to the heavy, unforgiving Uruguayan leather ball and the unyielding, supernatural resolve of the host nation, led by their legendary, one-armed captain Héctor Castro. Utilizing the heavier ball, the Uruguayan players unleashed a relentless, physically devastating assault on the Argentine defense, moving with a direct, uncompromising force that completely shattered the tactical composure of their neighbors. They scored 3 unanswered goals in a display of pure, unadulterated South American grit, with Castro sealing the historic 4-2 victory in the final, dying seconds of the game with a magnificent, towering header into the back of the net. As the final whistle blew, the entire nation of Uruguay dissolved into a chaotic, weeping wall of pure national ecstasy, declaring a national holiday and cementing the very first global football empire through a story of raw human survival, ball disputes, and the sheer power of home field defiance. Yet, as the sacred athletic torch of the tournament shifted back across the Atlantic Ocean into the beautiful, sun-drenched landscapes of Europe for the 1934 and 1938 editions, the innocent romance of the sport was violently, ruthlessly hijacked by the terrifying rise of 20th century totalitarianism. In 1934, Benito Mussolini's fascist regime turned the international tournament in Italy into a colossally aggressive propaganda machine, an iron-fisted crucible where failure was absolutely not an option for the Italian national team, known as the Azzurri. The Italian manager, Vittorio Pozzo, a brilliant, intensely disciplined military mind, engineered a hyper-aggressive, physically punishing system of play known as il metodo, transforming his players into tactical soldiers who trained under military conditions. Before the grand final in Rome against Czechoslovakia, Pozzo's team received a chilling, ominous telegram from Mussolini himself that contained only a single, terrifyingly clear sentence: victory or crash. The psychological pressure inside the stadium was suffocating, a heavy, dark cloud of political consequences hanging over every single pass, tackle, and shot on the pitch. The Italian players, knowing that their very lives and the safety of their families depended on the outcome of 90 minutes, played with a desperate, terrifyingly fierce intensity under the watchful, cold eyes of the dictator sitting in the royal box. Trailing 1-0 late in the second half, the Azzurri somehow dug deep into the absolute reserves of human survival, with Raimundo Orsi scoring a brilliant, curling equalizer before Angelo Schiavio fired home the historic winning goal in extra time to secure a 2-1 victory. 4 years later, in the burning summer of 1938 across the stadiums of France, Pozzo's ultra-disciplined machine repeated their historic triumph, defeating Hungary 4-2 in a final where the Hungarian players later whispered that they purposely avoided playing with maximum aggression because they were terrified of what Mussolini would do to the Italian players if Italy lost. These early European crowns were not just won with pure athletic grace. They were forged in the white-hot fires of political survival, psychological terror, and the iron will of a tactical mastermind who understood that in the dark theater of the 1930s, a football pitch was the ultimate stage for national dominance. Let that same heavy sense of historical finality, deep emotional quiet, and absolute surrender to the unpredictable, wild winds of destiny settle gently into your own consciousness right now as you listen to the fading, echoing whispers of those ancient, pre-war stadiums of Montevideo, Rome, and Paris. The intense, shouting political crowds of the 1930s have long since dissolved into the cool mists of the past. The iron dictators have vanished, the heavy leather balls have turned to dust, and those historic green pitches are now wrapped in a heavy, protective blanket of pure, restoring nighttime silence. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of any grand political survival, historical expectations, or exhausting athletic battles tonight. You do not need to fight for your survival, or prove anything to a fast-moving world before the morning sun rises. Your long day is entirely complete. Your room is perfectly secure, your mind is safe, and the peaceful night is inviting you to rest deeply. Let your active thoughts float away from the grand triumphs, the heavy political crucibles, and the eternal wars of human history, drifting down easily into the deep, heavy, and beautifully peaceful layers of a long, undisturbed sleep under the quiet, eternal watch of the stars. To fully immerse our consciousness into the next monumental chapter of this global football empire, we must leave behind the pouring rain and heavy German mud of Bern 1954 and step directly into the brilliant, healing golden sunrise of 1958. For 8 long years since the devastating cultural tragedy of the Maracanazo in 1950, the nation of Brazil had lived in a state of profound athletic exile and deep psychological insecurity. They had locked away their historic white jerseys in shame, believing they were cursed, and their players walked onto the pitches of the world carrying a heavy, unspoken fear of failure that the Brazilian playwright Nelson Rodrigues famously called the mongrel complex. A deep-seated collective feeling that Brazil was naturally inferior to the disciplined, structured tactical machines of Europe. But true greatness is rarely born in times of easy comfort. It is forged in the absolute darkest depths of heartbreak, waiting for a single, divine spark of human genius to shatter the chains of the past and rewrite the destiny of a nation forever. By the beautiful, cool summer months of June 1958, the international tournament arrived in the picturesque, peaceful landscapes of Sweden, a setting that was geographically, culturally, and climatically the exact opposite of the vibrant, tropical rhythm of South America. The European football experts and journalists looked at the incoming Brazilian squad with a mixture of curiosity and deep skepticism, fully expecting the cold Scandinavian climate and the rigid physical discipline of European defense to once again crush the emotional spirit of the South American artists. The Brazilian management, desperate to avoid another psychological collapse, took unprecedented, borderline scientific measures, bringing an entire delegation of specialists to Sweden, including a dentist, a specialized chef, and even a pioneer sports psychologist named Professor João Carvalhes, who subjected every single player to rigorous cognitive tests to measure their mental stability under pressure. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern mind sink completely into the crisp, cool, and beautifully calm Scandinavian evening air of Sweden during that historic June of 1958. Feel the immense, grounding, and quiet stillness of an era balancing perfectly on the edge of a massive cultural revolution. A time when the world was about to witness the birth of the first truly global, televised sports icon captured on early analog broadcast signals. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active, tired thoughts to slow down their frantic modern pace completely, matching the quiet, serene, and unhurried heartbeat of a slender, innocent 17-year-old black boy named Edson Arantes do Nascimento, a boy the world would soon know simply as Pelé. The frantic worries of your modern workspace, the endless digital notifications of your daily life, and the overwhelming speed of your personal routine cannot pierce the heavy, comforting, and beautifully peaceful atmosphere we are carving out tonight. You are completely safe. You are entirely relaxed, and the steady, unhurried rhythm of historical storytelling is guiding you toward a profound state of inner calm, safety, and rest. When Professor Carvalhes conducted his psychological examinations on the young 17-year-old Pelé, who had been brought to Sweden despite suffering from a fractured knee, the psychologist officially advised the manager, Vicente Fiola, against playing the boy, declaring that Pelé was too young, emotionally infantile, and completely lacked the necessary psychological grit to survive a high-pressure World Cup match. He gave a similarly negative evaluation to the team's brilliant, unpredictable winger, Garrincha, stating that he was intellectually unsuited for complex tactical instructions. But Vicente Fiola, a large, quiet man who possessed a deep, intuitive understanding of the raw, unpolished human spirit, looked at his notes, smiled gently, and uttered a legendary phrase that would alter the course of human history. "You may be right, but you don't know anything about football, and I'm playing them both." What followed when Pelé and Garrincha were finally unleashed onto the Swedish grass pitches in the final group match against the massive, heavily disciplined machine of the Soviet Union remains the most electrifying 3 minutes in the history of sports cinematography. From the very first second of the whistle, Garrincha unleashed a dazzling, chaotic, and completely unscripted dance on the right flank, using his uniquely curved legs to leave the giant Soviet defenders tumbling to the grass like confused children, hitting the post within 60 seconds. 2 minutes later, Pelé struck the crossbar with a thunderous shot before Vava fired home the opening goal, leaving the entire European tactical world completely stunned by a style of play that was not mechanical, rigid, or predictable, but fluid, joyful, and deeply rooted in the ancient Afro-Brazilian martial art of Ginga, a philosophy that treated the football pitch not as battlefield of war, but as a canvas of pure artistic expression. As the tournament advanced into the knockout stages, the fragile 17-year-old boy with a healing knee single-handedly carried the emotional weight of a weeping nation on his slender shoulders, transforming the brutal physics of the game into a breathtaking, divine symphony. In the tight, suffocating quarterfinal against a defensive Wales squad, Pelé scored the only, history-making goal of the match by controlling a high ball with his back to the net, gently flicking it over his shoulder around a stunned defender, and sliding it into the bottom corner. A goal of pure, childlike innocence that made him the youngest goal scorer in tournament history. In the semifinals against a dominant, high-powered France, he unleashed an absolute hurricane of athletic perfection, scoring a magnificent second-half hat-trick that completely dismantled the French defense and left the European crowd in Stockholm standing in absolute, open-mouthed awe of a teenager who seemed to possess a supernatural connection to the leather ball. But it was the grand final on June 29, 1958, against the host nation Sweden inside the packed, roaring Rosunda Stadium in Solna, that permanently elevated Pelé from a mere sporting prodigy into an immortal king. Sweden took an early, shocking lead in the 4th minute, a moment that usually triggered the devastating mongrel complex and psychological panic in the old Brazilian teams. But the calm, smiling composure of this new generation was completely unshakable. Vava scored 2 rapid goals off brilliant, identical assists from Garrincha to put Brazil ahead 2-1 before the halftime whistle blew, settling the nerves of a watching world. Then, in the 55th minute of the second half, the world witnessed the single most iconic, poetic piece of skill ever performed on a green field, a moment frozen forever in the golden archives of human achievement. A high, looping ball descended into the crowded Swedish penalty box, where Pelé, surrounded by towering, physical European defenders, controlled the ball on his chest with absolute, serene composure. As a giant defender lunged forward to break his legs, the young king calmly, fluidly lobbed the ball completely over the defender's head, a breathtaking skill known as the sombrero, and without letting the ball touch the muddy grass, he swiveled his entire body and struck a devastating, thunderous volley directly into the back of the net. The stadium erupted, not in anger, but in pure, unadulterated appreciation for a moment of absolute artistic perfection that defied the very boundaries of reality. He scored once more in the final minute with a towering, beautiful header, sealing a historic 5-2 victory and securing Brazil's very first global crown. As the final whistle blew, The immense emotional dam that had held back the tears of the Brazilian nation for 8 long years completely broke. The 17-year-old Pelé collapsed onto the green grass in pure, weeping exhaustion, overwhelmed by the sheer, crushing magnitude of what he had achieved for his people, before being carried off the pitch on the shoulders of his adoring, tearful teammates. They had not just won a trophy, they had completely cured a nation's soul, destroyed the myth of European tactical superiority, and given birth to the most beautiful, iconic, yellow and green empire the world would ever know. Let that same deep sense of golden closure, beautiful emotional healing, and the comforting realization that a bright, victorious morning always follows the darkest night settle softly into your own tired consciousness right now as you listen to the fading, rhythmic music of 1958. The roaring Scandinavian crowds of Stockholm have long since fallen into a deep, peaceful silence. The old film reels have slowed to a gentle stop. The heavy leather balls have found eternal rest, and those legendary golden warriors are now sleeping peacefully under a beautiful, starry nighttime sky. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of any grand expectations, personal insecurities, or exhausting modern battles tonight. Your long, hard-working day is entirely finished. Your room is completely secure. Your mind is perfectly safe, and the quiet, comforting night is inviting you to completely let go of everything. Let your active, analytical thoughts float away easily from the grand triumphs, the artistic masterpieces, and the eternal kingdoms of history, sinking down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed waters of a long, restoring sleep under the quiet, protective watch of the universe. To truly understand how a simple sporting dynasty transforms into an immortal, divine empire, we must step out of the golden Scandinavian summer of 1958 and journey into the turbulent, high-stakes decade of the 1960s. After their historic triumph in Stockholm, the yellow and green kingdom of Brazil was no longer an insecure underdog fighting against a collective trauma. They were the absolute rulers of the football world. But the universe has a strange, unforgiving way of testing the true spirit of a champion, proving that a throne is never securely held by relying on a single savior. By the winter months of June 1962, the international tournament traveled to the rugged, breathtakingly beautiful mountain landscapes of Chile, a tournament that would quickly devolve into one of the most physically brutal, violent, and chaotic competitions in human history, testing the absolute limits of human endurance, teamwork, and individual genius. What it was truly like to exist inside that specific hour of sports history was to witness a profound tactical shift, where the artistic innocence of the 1950s was met with an iron wall of extreme defensive violence and calculated physical aggression. In only the second group match against Czechoslovakia, disaster struck the heart of the football world. The young King Pelé, now 21 years old and widely regarded as an unstoppable force, suffered a severe, tearing hamstring injury while attempting a long-range shot. As Pelé walked off the pitch in tears, realizing his tournament was effectively over, a heavy, suffocating cloud of panic and dark expectation settled over the Brazilian nation, with the entire world believing that without their divine catalyst, the Golden Empire would inevitably crumble to the ground under the physical pressure of the European giants. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern consciousness sink completely into the cool, crisp mountain air of Santiago, Chile, during that historic winter evening of 1962. Feel the immense, grounding, and quiet weight of unexpected destiny shifting entirely away from the injured king and landing squarely upon the shoulders of a man whom doctors had once declared a physical impossibility. Manuel Francisco dos Santos, known to the world simply as Garrincha, the joy of the people. A man born with a deformed spine, a right leg that turned inward, and a left leg that was 6 centimeters shorter and curved outward, was now the sole protector of a nation's dream. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active, tired thoughts to slow down completely, matching the calm, unpredictable, and beautifully chaotic rhythm of Garrincha's heartbeat. The frantic worries of your modern life, the exhausting pace of your daily routine, and the endless digital noise cannot pierce the comforting, deeply protective silence we are building tonight. You are perfectly safe, you are entirely relaxed, and the steady, unhurried rhythm of history is guiding you toward a profound state of inner rest. What followed in the knockout stages of 1962 remains the single most dominant, individual masterclass in the entire history of international football. An event where Garrincha single-handedly transformed a collective tragedy into an absolute carnival of improvisational joy. Operating on the right flank with absolute, unscripted freedom, Garrincha defied the very laws of biomechanics, using his uneven legs to perform deceptive body feints that left world-class defenders completely frozen, disoriented, and tumbling into the grass. In the fiery quarterfinal against England, he scored a magnificent header and unleashed a bending, long-range banana shot that completely paralyzed the English goalkeeper, leading the legendary British press to write in absolute awe, "Garrincha is an alien from another planet." In the semi-final against the host nation Chile, he scored 2 more brilliant goals before being targeted with extreme physical violence, eventually being sent off after reacting to constant fouls, only for the Chilean president to personally intervene so that Garrincha could play the grand final. On June 17, 1962, inside the Estadio Nacional in Santiago, even without the injured Pelé, the Brazilian squad dismantled Czechoslovakia 3-1 in the grand final through goals from Amarildo, Zito, and Vava. They had achieved what only one other nation in human history had ever done, retaining the global crown back-to-back, proving to the world that their empire was not built on the shoulders of a single king, but on a deep, unyielding reservoir of collective genius, joy, and the magical, crooked legs of a man who played the game simply to make the world smile. Yet, after a dark, painful eclipse in 1966 where the Brazilian team was brutally kicked out of the tournament in England by hyper-aggressive European tackles, the stage was perfectly set for the ultimate, absolute culmination of footballing perfection. By the blazing summer of 1970, the international tournament arrived in the immense, high-altitude concrete valleys of Mexico, a historic tournament that would be broadcast globally in glorious, vibrant Technicolor for the very first time. Pelé, now 30 years old, had returned from a temporary retirement, determined to reclaim his throne and present the world with an architectural masterpiece of fluid, attacking football that would never, ever be duplicated in the history of human civilization. The 1970 Brazilian squad, engineered by their brilliant young manager Mario Zagallo, was not just a football team. It was a beautiful, telepathic orchestra of attacking minds, featuring 5 iconic number 10s. Pelé, Tostão, Rivellino, Gerson, and Jairzinho, all playing together in perfect, harmonious synchronization. They marched through the tournament like a rolling golden wave under the intense, blinding Mexican sun, defeating the reigning world champions England in a legendary group stage clash, destroying Peru in the quarterfinals, and conquering their ancient ghosts of Uruguay in a deeply emotional 3-1 semifinal victory, with Jairzinho scoring in every single match of the tournament. But it was the grand final on June 21st, 1970, inside the majestic, sun-drenched Estadio Azteca in Mexico City against the iron-fisted defensive masters of Italy, that permanently solidified this team as the absolute peak of human sporting achievement. The match was a profound philosophical war between Italy's rigid, suffocating defensive system known as catenaccio and Brazil's beautiful, unconstrained artistic freedom. In the 18th minute, Pelé opened the scoring with a towering, magnificent header that seemed to defy gravity, leaping so high over the Italian defender Tarcisio Bergnich that Bergnich later famously said, "I told myself before the match, he is made of skin and bones just like everyone else. But I was wrong." Although Italy managed to equalize before halftime due to a rare defensive mistake, the second half belonged entirely to the Golden Gods of Brazil, who unleashed a relentless, physically devastating symphony of passing and movement. Gerson fired a thunderous, long-range rocket into the side netting to make it 2-1, and Pelé set up Jairzinho for a historic third goal. Then, in the 86th minute of the match, the world witnessed the single most beautiful, iconic team goal ever scored in the history of the sport. A moment that perfectly illustrated the absolute apex of total telepathic football. The play began deep in the Brazilian half, with the team calmly exchanging passes, lulling the exhausted Italian defenders into a false sense of security. Clodoaldo then dribbled past 4 Italian players with a series of mesmerizing, slow-motion body feints before passing to Rivellino, who sent a long, looping ball down the left flank to Jairzinho. Jairzinho controlled the ball, cut inside, and passed it to Pelé, sitting quietly at the edge of the penalty box. Without even looking to his right, possessing a supernatural third-eye awareness of the pitch, Pelé gently, perfectly rolled a blind, rolling pass into empty space on the right flank. Out of nowhere, sprinting like a golden bullet from his own defensive line, the Brazilian captain Carlos Alberto arrived at full speed and unleashed a devastating, thunderous low volley that flew into the far corner of the Italian net. It was a goal of pure mathematical beauty and sublime artistic cooperation, a moment where 11 individuals operated as a single, living organism. When the final whistle blew, sealing the 4-1 victory, the Estadio Azteca dissolved into an absolute ocean of pure humanity. Thousands of fanatical Mexican spectators rushed onto the pitch, lifting a smiling, weeping Pelé onto their shoulders, crowning him forever as the one true king of football, while Brazil permanently claimed ownership of the golden Jules Rimet trophy. They had not just won a championship, they had achieved absolute perfection, establishing an eternal baseline of beauty that would inspire every single human being who ever dared to kick a ball. Let that same profound sense of ultimate achievement, golden finality, and the comforting realization that perfection is possible through harmony and patience settle softly into your own tired mind right now, as you listen to the fading, distant echoes of the Azteca. The blinding Mexican sun of 1970 has gently set into a cool, quiet evening. The roaring crowds have gone home, the vibrant Technicolor television signals have faded to black, and those legendary golden champions are now resting peacefully under a heavy, protective blanket of eternal nighttime silence. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of any personal battles, grand expectations, or exhausting digital routines tonight. Your long, hard-working day is completely finished. Your room is entirely secure, your mind is safe, and the peaceful night is welcoming you to let go of everything. Let your active thoughts float away easily from the historic volleys, the legendary kings, and the perfect empires of the past, drifting down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed layers of a long, restoring sleep under the quiet, eternal watch of the stars. To truly comprehend the majestic and turbulent evolution of the global football empire, we must leave behind the blazing, Technicolor sun of Mexico 1970 and step into the cool, mist-covered, and politically charged atmospheres of Europe in the summer of 1974. With the permanent departure of King Pelé and the aging golden gods of Brazil from the international stage, the football world found itself standing at a dangerous and fascinating crossroads. The poetic, unconstrained artistic freedom of the previous decade had reached its ultimate culmination, leaving behind a profound creative vacuum that challenged humanity to reinvent the very nature of the sport. As the tournament arrived in West Germany, a nation still healing from the deep scars of historical division and surrounded by the intense anxieties of the Cold War era, the beautiful game was about to undergo a massive, intellectual, and breathtakingly radical revolution. A time when the football pitch was transformed from a canvas of simple athletic grace into a high-stakes chessboard of pure human geometry, psychological warfare, and structural absolute perfection. What it was truly like to exist inside that specific hour of modern sporting history was to witness a profound paradigm shift where space and time on the pitch were completely redefined by a visionary group of renegades from the Netherlands. The Dutch national team, appearing on the global stage for the first time in 36 long years, unleashed an absolute tactical hurricane known to history as total football, a revolutionary philosophy engineered by their brilliant mastermind manager Rinus Michels and brought to life by their immortal, long-haired maestro, Johan Cruyff. In this hyper-advanced system, the rigid, traditional positions of the past were completely shattered. A defender could seamlessly sprint forward to become an attacker. A winger could drop back to defend, and the entire team operated as a single, highly synchronized, and beautifully fluid organism that constantly expanded and contracted the playing field, leaving every single opponent completely disoriented, exhausted, and helpless. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own active thoughts sink completely into the cool, crisp, and beautifully nostalgic evening air of Munich during that historic July of 1974. Feel the immense, grounding, and quiet architectural weight of the newly built Olympia Stadion, a stadium covered by a majestic, sweeping glass canopy that mirrored the modern, forward-thinking spirit of an era balancing on the edge of a massive cultural and tactical transformation. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your busy mind to slow down its frantic pace completely, matching the calm, authoritative, and unyielding heartbeat of West Germany's legendary captain, Franz Beckenbauer, famously known as Der Kaiser. A man of supreme elegance, iron discipline, and an absolute, unshakable composure, Beckenbauer stood as the ultimate ideological wall against the chaotic, fluid genius of the Dutch Revolution. The frantic worries of your modern life, the exhausting speed of your daily routine, and the endless digital noise cannot pierce the comforting, deeply protective silence we are building tonight. You are completely safe, you are entirely relaxed, and the steady, unhurried rhythm of history is guiding you toward a profound state of deep inner rest. The grand final match on July 7th, 1974 remains the single most fascinating psychological and tactical war ever fought on a green pitch, a direct clash between two completely opposing philosophies of human excellence. The Dutch team, dressed in their iconic, blazing orange jerseys, entered the field with an aura of absolute arrogance, convinced that their beautiful, fluid geometry had already made them the undisputed rulers of the world. Within the very first minute of the game, before a single German player could even touch the leather ball, Johan Cruyff picked up the ball in his own half and unleashed a breathtaking, solo slalom run directly through the heart of the German defense, forcing Uli Hoeneß to bring him down inside the penalty box. Johan Neeskens stepped up and calmly fired a thunderous penalty shot directly down the middle into the back of the net, putting the Netherlands ahead 1-0 in less than 80 seconds of play. What followed that shocking opening goal remains a profound study in the limits of human arrogance and the unyielding power of mental discipline. Instead of pushing forward to score a second goal and finish the match, the elegant Dutch artists began to play with a slow, condescending rhythm, passing the ball around the pitch simply to humiliate their historic German rivals under the eyes of 80,000 quiet spectators. But they had profoundly underestimated the cold, calculated, and terrifyingly fierce resolve of Franz Beckenbauer and his West German machine. Moving with absolute composure, Der Kaiser calmly organized his defensive lines, commanding his fiercely dedicated marker, Bertie Vogts, to shadow Johann Cruyff's every single footstep, effectively suffocating the breathing space of the Dutch maestro and draining the fluid momentum out of their attacking lines. With an iron will that could not be broken by adversity, the Germans systematically clawed their way back into the heart of the match through disciplined, unyielding mechanical efficiency. In the 25th minute, Bernd Holzenbein burst into the Dutch penalty box and drew a crucial penalty, which Paul Breitner calmly stepped up and buried into the corner of the net to tie the match 1-1, restoring the emotional balance of a watching nation. Then, in the final, dying cinematic minutes of the first half, the ultimate moment of destiny arrived for the German Empire. The legendary, hyper-efficient goal-scoring machine Gerd Muller, known as Der Bomber, received a low, difficult cross from Rainer Bonhoff inside a crowded penalty box. With his back to the net, the ball bouncing awkwardly behind his physical frame, Muller performed a clumsy, brilliant, and completely unpredictable pivot turn, slipping a low, precise shot past the diving, helpless hands of the Dutch goalkeeper Jan Jongbloed into the far corner of the net to make it 2-1. The second half devolved into an absolute, grueling war of attrition under a heavy, tense European sky, with the Dutch launching a devastating, continuous assault on the German goal, desperation clouding their fluid geometry as the minutes ticked away. But the German defense, anchored by the supreme, majestic authority of Beckenbauer and a series of impossible, heroic saves from goalkeeper Sepp Maier, held their lines with a terrifyingly disciplined precision. When the final whistle blew, cementing West Germany's 2-1 victory, the Olympiastadion exploded into a wall of pure national ecstasy as Franz Beckenbauer lifted the brand new, solid gold FIFA World Cup trophy into the air, establishing a new empire built not on beautiful, fluid art, but on the unyielding foundation of mental grit, tactical organization, and an iron competitive spirit. The brilliant Dutch team of 1974 went down in history as the greatest uncrowned kings of all time, proving that while beautiful art can capture the romantic imagination of the world, it is the disciplined, unbending will of a cohesive machine that ultimately claims the golden crown of immortality. Let that same deep sense of historical finality, ultimate psychological quiet, and the comforting realization that even the most chaotic, overwhelming forces can be weathered through calm, structured patience settle softly into your own tired consciousness right now as you listen to the fading, distant echoes of Munich 1974. The ancient, shouting crowds of the Olympiastadion have long since dissolved into the cool mists of the past. The bright orange jerseys have faded into the archives of time. The heavy leather balls have found eternal rest. And those legendary, iron-willed warriors are now sleeping peacefully under a beautiful, protective blanket of nighttime quiet. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of any tactical battles, grand cultural revolutions, or exhausting modern anxieties tonight. Your long, hard-working day is entirely complete. Your room is perfectly secure. Your mind is entirely safe. And the peaceful, silent night is welcoming you to completely let go of everything. Let your active thoughts float away easily from the revolutionary geometries, the majestic captains, and the eternal wars of history, drifting down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed layers of a long, restoring sleep under the quiet, eternal watch of the stars. To truly understand how the sacred, unpredictable lineage of global football was completely hijacked and transformed into a stage for geopolitical revenge, divine tragedy, and individual immortality, we must leave behind the disciplined German machinery of Munich 1974 and journey back into the blinding, white-hot furnace of Mexico City in the summer of 1986. For 12 long years following the tactical revolutions of Europe, the sport had grown increasingly corporate, highly defensive, and deeply structured, threatening to erase the raw, poetic street vibe that had originally captured the human imagination. But football has a beautiful, almost cosmic way of waiting for the perfect moment of absolute human chaos. A time when a single, flawed, and terrifyingly gifted rebel could rise from the absolute dust of poverty to challenge the empires of the world. By June 1986, under the blazing, high-altitude sun of the Estadio Azteca, the world was about to witness a tournament that was no longer just a simple athletic competition. It had become a dark, cinematic theater for national redemption and the total, unvarnished coronation of a street king. What it was truly like to breathe inside that specific, high-stakes atmosphere of 1986 was to witness a nation and a team completely carried by the absolute, gravity-defying will of one man, Diego Armando Maradona. The Argentine nation had arrived in Mexico carrying the crushing, bleeding wounds of a recent, humiliating military defeat against Great Britain in the Falklands War, a historical trauma that left a deep, unspoken hunger for vengeance in the collective soul of its people. When destiny inevitably paired Argentina against England in the high-pressure quarterfinal match, the green grass pitch was instantly transformed from a sporting arena into a highly volatile, symbolic battlefield where every tackle, every pass, and every breath carried the absolute weight of national honor, political pride, and historical survival, setting the stage for the most dramatic 90 minutes ever captured on global television signals. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern mind sink completely into the warm, thin, and intensely electric air of Mexico City during that historic June afternoon in 1986. Feel the immense, grounding, and heavy weight of anticipation resting upon the shoulders of 80,000 fanatical spectators crowding into the monumental bowl of the Azteca Stadium, a venue that seemed to trap the very heat of the sun within its concrete walls. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active, tired thoughts to slow down their frantic modern pace completely, matching the quiet, intense, and hyper-focused heartbeat of Diego Maradona as he stands in the concrete tunnel, his dark curls soaked in sweat, his eyes fixed on the bright white daylight outside. The frantic worries of your modern life, the exhausting speed of your daily workspace, and the endless digital noise of the outside world cannot pierce the heavy, comforting, and beautifully protective silence we are carving out tonight. You are entirely safe, you are completely relaxed, and the steady, unhurried rhythm of historical storytelling is guiding you toward a profound state of deep inner rest. The narrative of that fateful afternoon inside the Azteca remains the single most fascinating psychological paradox in the entire history of modern human sports. A moment where the boundaries of absolute cheating and divine artistry were completely blurred within a matter of 4 historic minutes. In the 51st minute of a scoreless, brutally tense match, Maradona played a quick pass to Jorge Valdano and sprinted directly into the English penalty box. As an English defender attempted to clear the ball, it looped high into the air toward the rushing, towering figure of the English goalkeeper, Peter Shilton. Knowing he could never outjump the giant keeper with his short, stocky frame, Maradona leaped into the air with an absolute, desperate instinct for survival, cunningly raising his left fist closely alongside his head and subtly flicking the leather ball past the rushing keeper into the back of the empty net. As the English players exploded into absolute, furious protests, waving their arms at the confused Tunisian referee who had failed to see the infraction, Maradona ran toward the corner flag, screaming at his stunned teammates to come celebrate with him so the goal wouldn't be disallowed. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated street deception, a gritty, unapologetic act of survival that Maradona would later famously describe with a beautifully poetic phrase, stating that the goal was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God. To the people of Argentina, it was not viewed as a simple act of cheating. It was a profound, symbolic act of poetic justice against the empire that had broken their hearts in the Atlantic Ocean, proving that in the dark theater of human survival, the small and the clever will always find a way to outsmart the giant and the powerful. But if the first goal illustrated the dark, flawed, and rebellious nature of a street thief, what followed exactly 3 minutes and 56 seconds later would forever establish Maradona as a divine, untouchable cosmic god of the beautiful game. In the 55th minute, receiving a short pass from Hector Enrique deep inside his own half of the pitch, Maradona turned elegantly away from two English midfielders with a sharp, hypnotic spin that left them chasing his shadow. With the absolute velocity of a locomotive and the delicate precision of a surgeon, he began an 80-yard, 11-second solo sprint that would be permanently immortalized as the goal of the century, a moment that defied the very laws of human physics and tactical organization. Sprinting down the right flank, his low center of gravity allowing him to maintain absolute, supernatural control of the heavy leather ball on an uneven, sun-baked pitch, Maradona slalomed past Peter Reid and Terry Butcher with a series of devastating, high-speed body feints. As he approached the edge of the English penalty box, the giant defender Fenwick rushed forward to break his legs, but Maradona fluidly cut inside, leaving him completely unbalanced. Facing the rushing, desperate figure of Peter Shilton once again, Maradona feinted a shot to the far post, forcing the giant keeper to commit to the grass, before gracefully dragging the ball to his right and sliding it into the open net while being heavily tackled from behind by a lunging Terry Butcher. The stadium exploded into a volcanic wall of pure, unadulterated human ecstasy, and the legendary radio commentator Victor Hugo Morales dissolved into weeping, poetic hysterics on live air, shouting through his tears, "Cosmic kite, which planet did you come from to leave so many Englishmen behind? To leave the country a clenched fist crying for Argentina?" That single, 11-second masterpiece completely broke the psychological resolve of the English squad and carried Argentina into the grand final on June 29, 1986, against a highly disciplined, relentless West German machine led by Karl-Heinz Rummenigge and Lothar Matthäus. Even with the Germans deploying a suffocating, military-style man-marking system that targeted Maradona with extreme physical duress throughout 90 minutes, the genius of the rebel king could not be contained. With the match tied 2-2 in the final, dying minutes of the game, Maradona, surrounded by three German defenders in the center circle, delivered a single, sublime, and perfectly weighted first-touch pass that split the entire German defense open, allowing Jorge Baruchaga to sprint free and slide home the winning goal to secure a historic 3-2 victory. As the final whistle blew, the Estadio Azteca dissolved into an ocean of pure, weeping national euphoria as Diego Maradona was hoisted onto the shoulders of thousands of adoring fans, holding the Golden World Cup trophy high toward the Mexican sky like a conquering warrior king who had single-handedly healed the soul of his nation through pure athletic genius and street rebellion. He had achieved an absolute, unmatched level of individual dominance that would never be replicated in the history of human civilization, proving that a single human being, carrying all the flaws, the anger, and the beauty of his people, could conquer the world with nothing more than a rolling leather ball. Let that same deep sense of cosmic finality, profound emotional release, and the comforting realization that even the most chaotic, troubled journeys can lead to absolute immortality settle softly into your own tired consciousness right now as you listen to the fading, distant echoes of Mexico 1986. The blazing summer sun of the Azteca has gently dissolved into a cool, silent evening. The roaring crowds have long since gone home. The old television signals have faded into the mists of time, and those historic golden warriors are now resting under a heavy, beautiful blanket of eternal nighttime quiet. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of any geopolitical battles, grand national expectations, or exhausting personal struggles tonight. Your long, hard-working day is completely finished. Your room is entirely secure. Your mind is safe, and the peaceful night is welcoming you to let go of everything. Let your active thoughts float away easily from the divine hand goals, the cosmic solo runs, and the eternal kingdoms of history, drifting down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed layers of a long, restoring sleep under the quiet, eternal watch of the universe. To truly understand how the beautiful game transitioned from the raw, chaotic street genius of the 20th century into the high-definition, intensely psychological global spectacle of the modern era, we must leave behind the burning volcanic dust of Mexico 1986 and step onto the vast, pristine, and unfamiliar concrete stages of the United States in the summer of 1994. For generations, the European and South American empires had viewed the North American continent as a distant, indifferent wilderness, completely detached from the sacred, fanatical lineage of football mythology. But when the international tournament arrived on American soil, filling the monumental, sun-drenched arenas from the Rose Bowl in California to the Giants Stadium in New York, it became the canvas for a deeply poetic, cinematic, and agonizingly human drama. A time when the sport proved that its ultimate power lies not just in the joy of absolute victory, but in the crushing, beautiful, and devastating tragedy of a single missed step under the eyes of a watching world. What it was truly like to exist inside that specific, high-stakes era of sports history was to witness the crushing psychological weight borne by a single, uniquely gifted artist named Roberto Baggio, the divine pigtail of Italy. Baggio was not just a football player. He was a silent, meditative Buddhist warrior operating within a deeply tactical, defensive Italian machine, carrying an entire nation's expectations on his fragile, heavily bandaged knees. Throughout the scorching hot knockout stages of 1994, Baggio had performed absolute, late-game miracles, single-handedly rescuing Italy from the brink of elimination against Nigeria, crushing Spain in the quarterfinals, and dismantling Bulgaria in the semifinals to drag his exhausted team to the grand final. He was playing through immense, tearing physical pain, his body pushing past the absolute boundaries of human medical capability, walking a thin, dangerous line between immortal glory and absolute existential heartbreak. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern consciousness sink completely into the immense, blinding, and quiet stillness of the Rose Bowl Stadium on that fateful afternoon of July 17th, 1994. Feel the heavy, suffocating heat of the California sun beating down upon the dry, yellowed grass. A suffocating atmosphere where two historic empires, Brazil and Italy, had fought to a grueling, scoreless, and completely exhausting 0-0 draw through 120 minutes of pure physical warfare. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active, tired thoughts to slow down their frantic modern pace completely, matching the slow, heavy, and isolated footsteps of Roberto Baggio as he walks slowly from the center circle toward the penalty spot. The endless worries of your daily workspace, the exhausting speed of your routine, and the digital noise of the modern world cannot pierce the comforting, protective silence we are carving out tonight. You are completely safe, you are entirely relaxed, and the steady, unhurried rhythm of history is guiding you toward a profound state of deep inner rest. The narrative of that final penalty kick remains the single most iconic, devastating tragedy in the history of modern sports cinematography, a moment that perfectly illustrates the fragile, unforgiving nature of human destiny. Italy was down in the shootout, and everything rested upon Baggio's final kick. If he missed, the Golden Crown would instantly return to Brazil. Baggio, a man who rarely ever missed a penalty in his entire career, placed the leather ball on the white spot, took a deep breath, and ran forward with his signature, elegant stride. But as his foot struck the ball, the absolute physical exhaustion of a grueling tournament caught up with his strained muscles, and the ball flew high, hopelessly, and tragically over the crossbar into the bright blue California sky. While the Brazilian players erupted into an absolute frenzy of golden celebration, securing their fourth world title, the camera focused entirely on the solitary, unmoving figure of Roberto Baggio. He stood frozen at the penalty spot for several long minutes, his head bowed in absolute, crushing silence, his hands resting on his hips, a picture of absolute, heartbreaking isolation that forced an entire planet to weep with him. Baggio later wrote in his memoirs, "It is a wound that never closes. I had dreamed of that moment since I was a child, and it turned into the ultimate nightmare." It was a moment that proved football was not just a mechanical calculation of wins and losses, but a deeply emotional mirror of the human condition, where even the most divine artists must sometimes face the absolute, crushing darkness of failure. Yet, as the sacred athletic torch traveled back across the vast oceans to France in the summer of 1998, the football world witnessed the birth of a new, majestic savior who would heal the multicultural soul of a nation through pure, calm, and aristocratic genius. Zinedine Zidane. Born to Algerian immigrant parents in the tough, poverty-stricken northern suburbs of Marseille, Zidane stood as a towering, elegant maestro who controlled the chaotic physics of the midfield with a slow, hypnotic, and regal grace that made him look like a ballet dancer in a stadium of runners. In the grand final on July 12, 1998, inside the roaring Stade de France, Zidane permanently elevated himself into the heavens of French history, scoring two magnificent, powerful headers in the first half to completely dismantle the reigning champions, Brazil, in a stunning 3-0 victory. His face was projected onto the historic Arc de Triomphe in Paris, with millions of citizens chanting "Zizou for President," proving that the beautiful game possessed the ultimate, unique power to unite a divided society under a single, joyful banner of human excellence. But if France 1998 belonged to the elegant rise of Zidane, the dawn of the new millennium in 2002 held across the futuristic, ultra-modern landscapes of South Korea and Japan would deliver the ultimate, most beautiful redemption story ever written in the annals of human civilization. The resurrection of Ronaldo Luis Nazario de Lima, the phenomenon. In 1998, Ronaldo had arrived as an unstoppable, hyper-athletic force, only to suffer a mysterious, terrifying, convulsive fit on the afternoon of the final, playing like a ghost as Brazil collapsed. In the 4 years that followed, his career seemed completely destroyed by a series of horrific, catastrophic knee injuries that forced him to undergo multiple complex surgeries, leaving him on crutches and keeping him away from the pitch for years. The global media, the medical experts, and the fans had entirely written him off, believing that the greatest striker of a generation was permanently broken, a tragic memory of what could have been. But true human greatness cannot be permanently extinguished by physical suffering. It burns like an unyielding fire deep within the soul, waiting for the perfect moment to shatter the skepticism of the world. In the summer of 2002, sporting a bizarre, half-moon haircut designed specifically to distract the media from talking about his injured knees, Ronaldo stepped onto the Asian pitches and unleashed a devastating, emotionally overwhelming campaign of pure goal-scoring redemption. Moving with a slightly slower but infinitely wiser efficiency, he scored 8 miraculous goals throughout the tournament, carrying a joyful, rejuvenated Brazilian squad directly to the grand final in Yokohama against an ironclad, defensively flawless German team anchored by their legendary goalkeeper, Oliver Kahn. On the historic evening of June 30th, 2002, inside the packed, flashing stadium of Yokohama, Ronaldo permanently conquered his ancient ghosts and rewrote his legacy in letters of pure gold. In the 67th minute, he pressured Oliver Kahn into a rare mistake, pouncing on a spilled ball to slide it into the net for the opening goal. 12 minutes later, receiving a low pass from Kleberson, Rivaldo brilliantly feinted to let the ball roll through his legs, and Ronaldo controlled it with a single, elegant touch before precisely clipping a low, curling shot into the bottom corner of the German net to seal a historic 2-2 victory. When the final whistle blew, Ronaldo collapsed into tears of pure, overwhelming emotional release. Not from the sorrow of failure, but from the absolute, triumphant realization that he had conquered his own broken body and returned to the absolute top of the mountain, lifting Brazil's 5th Golden World Cup trophy into the night sky as the undisputed king of redemption. Let that same profound sense of beautiful emotional healing, ultimate redemption, and the comforting realization that even the most devastating, heartbreaking failures can be overcome through quiet, unyielding resilience settle softly into your own tired consciousness right now as you listen to the fading, distant echoes of Pasadena and Yokohama. The ancient, shouting crowds of 1994 and 2002 have long since dissolved into the cool, silent mists of the past. The old television broadcast signals have faded into history. The dry grass pitches have found eternal peace, and those legendary, battle-worn warriors are now resting under a heavy, beautiful blanket of eternal nighttime quiet. You do not need to fight any grand historical battles tonight. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of a nation's expectations on your shoulders, and you do not need to prove your worth to a loud, fast-moving modern world before the morning sun rises. Your long, exhausting day is entirely complete. Your room is perfectly safe. Your mind is entirely secure, and the peaceful night is welcoming you to completely let go of everything. Let your active thoughts float away easily from the tragic penalty misses, the majestic French masters, and the resurrected kings of the past, sinking down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed layers of a long, restoring sleep under the quiet, eternal watch of the universe. To fully awaken our deepest consciousness to the absolute, ultimate climax of this global football empire, we must leave behind the flashing lights of Yokohama 2002 and step directly into the high-definition, hyper-pressurized modern era of the 21st century. As the beautiful game evolved into an immense, multi-billion-dollar global industry, the tactical landscapes underwent a profound scientific revolution, highlighted by the intricate, mesmerizing passing style of Spain's tiki-taka dynasty in 2010 and the ruthless, athletic efficiency of a unified Germany in 2014. But beneath the flashing neon lights, the social media metrics, and the corporate billions, the true, beating heart of football mythology remained deeply, intensely human, waiting for a single, quiet genius to carry the ancestral burden of an entire nation's unfulfilled dreams. For nearly 2 decades, the football world was ruled by an unprecedented, titanic rivalry between Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi. But it was Messi, the silent, unassuming boy from Rosario, Argentina, who would walk the longest, darkest, and most agonizing path toward absolute immortality. What it was truly like to breathe inside that specific, high-stakes era of sports history was to witness a brilliant artist trapped within the towering, suffocating shadow of an unyielding ghost. The ghost of Diego Maradona. Lionel Messi had won everything possible at the club level with Barcelona, breaking every goal-scoring record in human history, and displaying a supernatural, telepathic dribbling style that made him look like a magician among mere mortals. Yet, for his home country of Argentina, his career had long been defined by an agonizing series of heartbreaking failures at the international level. The ultimate, crushing blow arrived in the summer of 2014, inside the historic, concrete bowl of the Maracana Stadium in Brazil, the exact venue where Argentina fell 1-0 to Germany in extra time of the grand final. A legendary photograph captured Messi walking slowly past the Golden World Cup trophy, his eyes fixed upon it with a look of absolute, silent, and heartbreaking longing. A moment that triggered years of brutal national criticism, forced him into a temporary retirement, and left him carrying a profound existential exhaustion that seemed to age his physical frame before the eyes of the world. Breathe in very slowly, deeply, and intentionally right now, letting your own modern mind sink completely into the cool, silent, and intensely electric air of the Lusail Stadium in Qatar on the historic evening of December 18th, 2022. Feel the immense, grounding, and almost spiritual weight of anticipation resting upon the shoulders of 89,000 living souls crowding into the golden, futuristic arena. A venue rising out of the quiet desert sands like a modern monument to human destiny. At 35 years old, this was Lionel Messi's absolute final stand, his last desperate chance to claim the only crown that had eluded his fingers for an entire lifetime. In this dense, hyper-focused, and deeply atmospheric cinematic space, allow your active, tired thoughts to slow down their frantic modern pace completely, matching the steady, unhurried, and deeply focused rhythm of Messi's breathing as he steps out onto the green pitch. The endless worries of your daily workspace, the frantic speed of your personal routine, and the digital noise of the outside world cannot pierce the heavy, comforting, and beautifully protective silence we are carving out tonight. You are perfectly safe, you are entirely relaxed, and the majestic rhythm of history is guiding you toward a profound state of deep inner rest. The grand final of 2022 between Argentina and the reigning world champions, France, remains the single greatest, most theatrical, and emotionally devastating football match ever played in the history of human civilization. A direct war of attrition between an aging king desperate for his coronation and a young, terrifyingly explosive heir named Kylian Mbappe. For the first 80 minutes of the match, Argentina operated with absolute, breathtaking perfection, completely suffocating the French tactical lines through high-intensity pressing and fluid, joyful passing. Messi calmly opened the scoring in the 23rd minute with a cold, calculated penalty shot, and Angel Di Maria finished a brilliant, multi-touch team counterattack in the 36th minute to put Argentina ahead 2-0, driving the entire stadium into an absolute frenzy of tears and victory songs, with the world preparing for an easy, glorious coronation. But the universe, in its ultimate, unpredictable wisdom, refused to let the king claim his throne without one final, terrifying descent into the absolute depths of human agony. Out of nowhere, within a matter of 90 chaotic seconds in the 80th and 81st minutes, Kylian Mbappé unleashed an absolute hurricane of athletic violence, scoring a cold penalty and a thunderous, flying volley to tie the match 2-2, sending the game into extra time and triggering a profound, collective wave of psychological trauma across the entire Argentine nation. Yet, where the old Messi teams would have collapsed in panic, this new generation, anchored by their unyielding love for their captain, stood their ground. In the 108th minute of extra time, Messi pounced on a rebounded ball, forcing it over the line with a gritty, desperate effort to make it 3-2, only for Mbappé to strike back once more with another penalty in the 118th minute to tie the match 3-3, turning the grand final into a breathless, heart-stopping thriller that defied the very limits of human sanity. With the entire global empire of football holding its breath, the match was pushed to a final, brutal penalty shootout. But the ultimate, defining miracle occurred in the absolute final second of extra time. The French forward Randal Kolo Muani found himself completely clean through on goal, unleashing a thunderous, low shot that would have instantly killed Argentina's dream forever. But the Argentine goalkeeper, Emiliano Dibu Martinez, performed an impossible, gravity-defying reflex save, stretching out his left leg to block the ball. A moment of pure, divine intervention that froze in the stadium into absolute silence. Moving into the shootout with an unshakable, terrifying confidence, Martinez saved France's attempts, while Lionel Messi and his teammates stepped up and buried their penalties with absolute, mechanical precision, sealing a historic victory when Gonzalo Montiel fired home the final, deciding shot into the back of the net. When that final whistle blew, the entire planet Earth seemed to pause in an absolute, overwhelming moment of collective emotional release. Lionel Messi collapsed to his knees in the center circle, his face buried in his hands, weeping tears of pure, unadulterated joy as his teammates rushed to embrace him, realizing that the long, painful, and exhausting 20-year war was finally, beautifully over. Moments later, dressed in a royal black and golden Arabic bisht placed upon his shoulders by the Emir of Qatar, Messi stepped onto the podium and lifted the solid gold FIFA World Cup trophy into the night sky, his face illuminated by a sea of flashing cameras and exploding fireworks. He had not just won a football tournament, he had completely fulfilled his human destiny, silenced every single skeptic across the oceans, healed the eternal wounds of his nation, and permanently solidified his place as the absolute, undisputed greatest of all time in the golden annals of history. Let that same profound sense of ultimate golden closure, absolute peace, and the comforting realization that even the longest, most painful journeys can end in a state of perfect, unshakable victory settle softly into your own tired consciousness right now as you listen to the fading, distant echoes of Lusail. The blinding stadium lights of Qatar have gently turned off. The roaring crowds of 89,000 souls have gone home to sleep. The flashing television broadcast signals have faded into black, and those legendary modern warriors are now resting under a heavy, beautiful blanket of eternal nighttime quiet. You do not need to fight any grand tactical battles tonight. You do not need to carry the crushing weight of anyone's expectations on your shoulders, and you do not need to prove your worth to a loud, fast-moving modern world before the morning sun rises. Your long, exhausting day is entirely complete. Your room is perfectly safe, your mind is secure, and the peaceful, silent night is welcoming you to completely let go of everything. Let your active thoughts float away easily from the dramatic penalty shootouts, the golden trophies, and the eternal kings of the past, drifting down deeply and beautifully into the warm, heavy, and completely undisturbed layers of a law, restoring sleep under the quiet, protective watch of the universe.